In this unit, we're going to be looking at the final stage, reflection. Reflection involves using the information that you've gathered in the reporting backstage to establish what can be done to change how things are done. How can you be more effective? Now, there are 3 different types of reflection. The first is daily reflection, and this is done at the end of each day, where you look back on your lessons and you decide, did they go as I planned? If they did, fantastic, then those are teaching strategies you know that are effective in the classroom. And if it didn't go according to plan, then why not? What would you do differently? You also look at the elements that learners struggled with. Did you not provide enough time for learners to really grasp the skill? Did you put too much content in? Was it too easy for the learners? And then they became bored and lost interest. These are all different elements of your lesson that you need to sit down and think about, reflect and critique. And then suggestions for improvement on the lesson that you taught. If you could redo it, what would you change? Would you group learners differently? Would you maybe not do group activities and keep them seated at the desk? Would you cut out the amount of content that you placed in the lesson? Would you rather give the learners more time to establish the skill? These are all different elements that you need to think about and write down so that next time you teach that lesson, you do it better. The second type of reflection is a skill reflection, and this is done after teaching and assessing of a skill. And here you need to look at which lessons worked really well and which ones did not. So different skills need to be taught differently. And once you've found an effective teaching method or strategy that you can use in your classroom, you need to make notes of this so you can apply it to your other lessons. And through this, you'll develop an understanding of which concepts did the learners struggle to grasp and why. And again here, as mentioned, you might need to allocate more time for the learners to develop the skill. Maybe one lesson isn't enough and they need a series of 3 lessons. And did the overall end result surprise you? Is it what you expected? When you set this goal for the learners to achieve and then you implemented the lesson in your classroom, were you surprised? Did learners quickly grasp the information? Or did they struggle more than you thought they would? Did they need more assistance than you assumed that they would need? Was there anything that surprised you? And these are all important details that you need to write down in the reflection part of your lesson plan or on a scrap piece of paper, a note, a diary, anywhere. And the last type of reflection is your end of year or term reflection. And here you look at the learner's marks. And then you look back at your daily reflection. When you look at the learner's marks, did the learners perform really well? Then that's wonderful. And when you look at your daily reflection, possibly it will state that all the lessons went much better than you expected. If learners didn't perform well, then it's also important to look at your daily reflection to see what areas you struggled with and where you need to improve in possibly your teaching or your planning of the lesson to help the learners. You also need to decide on areas that you are proud of. Perhaps there was an area that you thought learners would struggle with and you implemented an effective teaching strategy that really got through to the learners, and you should be proud of that. You really should. Then you need to decide on which areas of your teaching you can improve. And this you can find through your daily reflection and your skill reflection. Now, as I mentioned, reflection is the last stage of the literacy cycle. But a cycle does not necessarily have a starting and an end point, but it continuously flows in a circular motion. So once you've taken the information from your reporting back and reflected on how your lessons have gone, how have your learners performed, this is the information that you use to then begin your new cycle and decide on your literacy goals for your learners. So with the information that you have gathered, would you adjust your goals? Would you keep them the same? Or would you add new ones? And then the literacy cycle begins all over again.